lounging, son.
Welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and back with me again is writer Jed MacKay. He's writing. I've had him on before. We've talked about some of your past stuff when you were starting Moon Knight. Still writing Moon Knight, but now you got Doctor Strange, you got Avengers coming up. So super stoked to have you back on, man.
Oh, thanks. Well, appreciate you taking the time to speak.
Yeah, of course, man. So, like I said, your Marvel resume just keeps continuing to grow each year, like so many books now. I love what you've been doing with Moon Knight. Doctor Strange just released yesterday, as of the day we're talking. Loved the first issue, and you're about to launch Avengers. Let's talk Moon Knight a little bit.
Sure.
You've really been hitting your stride, I think. A lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool concepts that you've been bringing into the book. What can we kind of expect with Mark moving forward?
I mean, we're just always trying to, strike that balance of, this is a Moon Knight story. It's a character with a lot of history. And we want to call back to that and honor that history, but also moving forward to kind of see what kind of new things we can do with them. So we've been very fortunate in that the book seems to have really found an audience. It's doing well, and it's kind of a nice, reinforcement that what we're doing is what a lot of people seem to enjoy. So we're trying to keep putting him in difficult situations, making his life hard, while at the same time taking time for those character moments, which I think is what a lot of people like about Moon Knight, where we're exploring what Mark is up to, and Jake and Steven, as well as all the people in his life, in his orbit now, because he's kind of accreted a fair amount of people around him. He's got a wider supporting cast than when we started this. So we're zooming in, making sure we're getting up to the action and adventure, but also taking the time to zoom out and explore these other characters a little more too, to kind of see what impact does it have on someone's life to be friends with Moon Knight, or like to have Moon Knight around them.
I mean, yeah, I love that you've Tiger has been in the book, and then you have Venom coming into the book too.
Yes.
I saw. What was the kind of that's not necessarily a character I would have thought to bring into the Moon Knight book, but I'm digging it. So what was the idea behind that?
It's pretty simple, really. Alessandro works really hard on this book, and I wanted to do something nice for him, and he really likes drawing Venom. So that was kind of the kernel of the idea, where I was like, hey, we're approved for some more issues. I'm putting some stuff together. Is there anything you particularly like? He's like, no, just lots of dark, moody stuff. I'm like, okay. He's like, well, if we could have Venom in it at some point, that'd be great. I'm like, sure, we'll figure that out. And so at first that was just the idea. I'm like, well, Moon Knight, Venom team up, I'll figure something out. But then once I sat down and started working on it, I'm like, well, this actually fits in perfectly with the larger story that we're telling here, this kind of larger arc, in a way that you'll see when, what is that, 23?
Mm-hmm.
I think 23 comes out. So that'll be May. So yeah, it's good. It's important when you're working with an artist to provide them stuff they really like to draw, because it's the same way. If I'm writing something and I'm bored writing it and bored reading it, then no one's going to be interested in drawing it or reading it when it's done. Right. In the same way, you want to play to the strengths of your collaborators. And man, Alessandro's Venom is incredible. Like it looks so good. So I'm pretty hyped for that to get out there for people to see it.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. And you just said you got approved for more issues. It kind of leads me into what I was going to ask, which is do you have an end in mind for your run?
I certainly don't.
Okay.
It's been selling quite well, so I'm feeling fairly safe about the health of the book, so to speak. So yeah, we're not preparing to wind down anytime soon. That's for sure.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I mean, I've been digging the Moon Knight book. I mean, it's awesome to see, because I think I talked about this with you last time. Moon Knight will have very small runs, not very many issues, and I feel like this is probably the longest one that I can remember in a very long time, especially from the same writer, same creative team for the most part. So I'm very, very happy to see that continue on.
Yeah, because I mean, I think our Moon Knight, it was volume 9. So
yeah,
he stacks those runs.
Yeah.
So it's every month we push that number further it's a little triumph, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. So I can't wait to see what you got cooking next. So I want to talk Doctor Strange now.
Sure.
Doctor Strange, I love that first issue. First
Oh,
of
thank you.
all, Pascal Ferry on art,
Oh, he's incredible, isn't he?
brilliant. Like wouldn't even have thought like what a great pairing that is for the character and an artist, and I've been digging what you've been doing. You start with Death of Doctor Strange, you led with Strange with Clea, and now Steven's back. So I definitely feel like he's had more of a spotlight probably since the whole MCU stuff. So the
Sure, yeah.
the, the world kind of knows who Doctor Strange is, whereas like you look before MCU and maybe they don't really know who he is. So what's kind of next for Steven now that he's back from the dead?
Well, it's kind of funny because, like, Doctor Strange #1 came out yesterday, but
Yeah.
in effect, it's kind of Doctor Strange 16 for me because
Right.
we did 5 issues of Death of Doctor Strange, and we did 10 issues of Strange. So we've been working in this corner of the Marvel universe for a while now. But it's just funny that this is the first time it's Doctor Strange proper.
Mm.
Yeah, like it's like any other #1 that's also a number 16 in that want to establish what this character's doing, like what is his place in the universe. Um, Doctor Strange is a character I find really interesting because I think he's got to be one of, if not the most like guest starred character, cameoed characters in Marvel Comics, because whenever someone has a magic problem in their book, they go to Doctor Strange.
Mhm.
It's like him and probably, I don't know, Reed Richards. Whenever someone has like a science problem, they go to Reed Richards.
Yeah.
So he's kind of a plot device in that way, and we want to kind of explore that idea to like make it explicit to say, Doctor Strange is a doctor. He has duty of care, but the house calls he goes on are frequently at the request of other people in the superpower community or superhero community. So we see that in this first issue. He's helping out Daredevil, he's helping out She-Hulk, he's helping out Spider-Man, Luke Cage, shit talking Doctor Doom.
That was so good, dude. Like I don't know. From the reading experience, I was like, man, he must have had a blast writing this because like you don't see that interaction between people in Doom that much. Where like
Yeah,
Doctor Strange was like, "You watch the way you talk to my wife," you know?
yeah. It's like listen, motherfucker.
Yeah.
And I think the relationship between Strange and Doom is always really interesting
Mhm.
because they're two people that Doom doesn't regard anyone as his equal, but I think he regards Strange as a friend in a way he doesn't most other people. There's a certain relationship there that we've seen it in was it Triumph and Torment,
Yeah.
that Doctor Strange, Doctor Doom team up. But what's interesting, I think, in that relationship is that you've got your Doctor Doom, Reed Richards kind of relationship, which is just nakedly antagonistic. Whereas you don't really see that with Strange because, he's not Doctor Doom's archenemy and Doctor Doom is not his. And I think there's an interesting relationship there, especially using that to pay off the events of Strange #1 when, Doom comes stamping into the sanctum, demanding his shit.
Is Doctor Doom like a favorite villain of yours? Because I mean, obviously, if you're writing Doctor Strange, I know like there's a history, but is that like a favorite character of yours to write so far, having written him a couple times? Yeah.
I think I like Doom. He's not someone I'm trying to kind of put into everything that I'm doing just because I feel like we've gotten a lot of Doom in the last, decade or so. Because I mean,
Mhm.
he's a fantastic villain. He's one of Marvel's best, and you've seen his turns in Fantastic Four, in Secret Wars and stuff. I feel like I always want to be cautious of overexposing villains, and especially villains that aren't in a book that I write. Doctor Doom business happens in Fantastic Four. I'm not going to go try and step on someone else's toes by making him, Doctor Strange's arch enemy or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, and in part too, because I think it would lack a certain gravity. Where if I'm saying, "Oh, Doctor Doom is turning up in Doctor Strange to fuck with them," I think readers will know that probably nothing lasting is really going to happen from that because
Mhm.
like if anyone's going to defeat Doctor Doom and it's going to have like a status quo change, it's going to be Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four, or like
Mhm.
from an event. And also the part of the thing is too, Doctor Strange has so many great villains in his own stable. Like I love Baron Mordo. We've got some Dormammu stuff coming up in #3, which I think may be the best issue I've written for the series so far. So yeah, like I think there's a danger of getting too stuck on the same villains. I mean, and for good reason, because they're great villains. Like, you want to use Doctor Doom because he's fantastic, but there's so much other stuff that you can get into that I think is worth your time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a huge fan of Doom too. I have to think that like writing a character like that has to be fun because he is such a douchebag.
Yeah,
But
oh, yeah, I
like,
mean, it's
but he's
great.
just like that, like the mix of like the ego and like all just like I don't know. It's just the way he comes across is just it's fun to read, and I have like that's why I said it has to be fun to write
Oh yeah, I mean,
somebody like that.
it's yeah, like it's great to bring him in. Like that was, I think, one of the first scenes when I was writing Strange that kind of came to me. I was like, well, obviously Doctor Doom is going to turn up and demand to be the Sorcerer Supreme. That's, I think, as like a perfect setup for to show readers who Clea is and what she's going to be doing moving forward.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think she's a character I didn't really know much about because, like, to be honest with you, I didn't read a lot of Doctor Strange, as a kid. I don't think there was. I mean, there probably was a book, but I wasn't reading it. I think I read
mhm.
the Brian K. Vaughan book. Obviously,
Yeah,
like The Oath was a book that I read, and then it wasn't again until like Jason Aaron, wrote his Doctor Strange book that
yeah,
I started reading the character. So like learning about Clea and stuff, and I loved seeing the dynamic between the two of them in issue one, and like how each day he's like taking care of something else, like the Spider-Man interaction, the Luke Cage interaction, like
yeah.
all of those things were super cool. And like, I really feel like so often you get a first issue. I know it's issue 16 for you as well, but like you
Well, we'll
get
call it
like,
issue one
yeah,
for
but you
convenience sake.
get like a first issue and it's not very like inviting. Like you sometimes you need to know a little bit, but I think you gave just enough to where like, and even in the previously in, like you gave a little brief synopsis of what happened before, and like you were
Yeah.
able to jump right into the action and into the story. I already can see the differences, but like how do you plan on making this kind of stand apart from like like I said, Jason Aaron, Mark Waid had a run not that long ago. Donny Cates had a brief little run with it too.
Mhm.
What are your plans to kind of make differentiate it and kind of make it stand completely apart from those?
Well, I think kind of one of the big things here is the relationship between Strange and Clea, because it's it was something that kind of snuck up on me when I was writing Death of Doctor Strange, in that my original plans, I hadn't planned to have a Clea in it at all. I was like, oh, maybe we'll have young Strange and Baron Mordo investigate Strange's death, and it'd be like a real odd couple. Baron Mordo would be like extremely bitchy and catty, and something like that. But Redditor was like, no, I mean, something like this, you got to have Clea in it. I'm like, okay, sure, I'll put Clea in. And then as soon as I did, she immediately stole the show, because like, as soon as I put her in the book, I giving in these flashes in my head of all these great scenes that we can do with her, and so she kind of became the star of that series. And now I really like having the two of them together, because it's something that you don't see as frequently as perhaps you used to. And by used to, I mean like going way back to like the earlier days of Marvel Comics, of a couple getting up to shenanigan stuff, like Ant-Man and the Wasp working together was great way back in the day. And people love that dynamic with the Fantastic Four. And I think it's an interesting look for Doctor Strange. It's an interesting change from how he's been portrayed for the last however many years, as a guy who makes hard choices, a guy who's always alone, even when he has people around him. And I thought it'd be interesting to look at it a different way. Like, what if you have a literal power couple, in the world of magic? People who are very different, but people who love each other and try their best to get through the difficulties that being sorcerers supreme will throw in their lives. So I think that relationship is kind of the thing, or like the hook, that I see as making this run stand on its own in a way, and like going in a direction that's different than the ones that came before it.
And then is it gonna stay more in its own corner? Kind of like, I mean, Moon Knight kind of stays in his own corner for the
Yeah.
most part, like, is that kind of your plan to a Doctor Strange, or is there going to be, and maybe just in the beginning, or is there plans for it to be more kind of a connection to the main Marvel line?
To an extent, because I mean, again, we've built up this sort of almost procedural framework of Doctor Strange being a consulting doctor, of going to help other people with their problems. And that's what we lead right into number 2 with, where I don't think it's surprising anybody that Moon Knight's going to call him and ask him for help, which is always funny because I really enjoy the thing we've built up that Clea and Moon Knight are friends and Doctor Strange hates Moon Knight. It's just like, this fucking guy. And yeah, like that leads in. So we've got that framework where we can, at any point we need something to happen, we just have someone call Doctor Strange for help, because again, it happens so frequently. Yeah. Anytime someone in their own book needs magical help, it's Doctor Strange they call. Like they're not calling, I don't know, just, whatever other magical character, Count Chaos or what have, or Agatha Harkness. It's usually Doctor Strange.
And is there any like surprise characters that you plan on kind of putting in the book that maybe you haven't had a chance to write yet, and like this is kind of a way for you to kind of be able to put those characters into a book you're writing?
I can't really think if there'd be anything that would qualify for that. Like we're also doing a lot of exploration of the Doctor Strange world, because we've set up a lot of stuff too through the course of these books. Like in Death of Doctor Strange, at the beginning, we had these warlord states set up across Earth. So, Umar and Tiboro and Dagoth and Agamon, setting up their own little fiefdoms within planet Earth. And so we're going to kind of go back to look at these warlords and see how that is affecting the world, what they're up to. These are not, they're not like video game characters who disappear when you don't look at them, right?
Yeah.
They're always going to be up to stuff in the background. We're going to see what that stuff is and like how that affects Strange and Clea. And then at the same time, we've also got Wong in his new role as the second agent of Wand. So he and Pandora Peters and now the freaky Dr. Z are going around the world trying to keep a lid on magical problems.
Yeah, I love the concept of Wand. I think that's super interesting also, and that in the first issue they recruit their third member of, and it's somebody they're going after. Is that going to continue to be a backup feature within the book as well?
It's not going to be a backup, but they will feature. I think actually solicits went out yesterday, so Doctor Strange number 4 is going to be a Wand issue. Okay. So we'll see Wong and Pandora and Dr. Z and what they're getting up to. And of course it ties in with the main narrative. It's not something entirely on its own, but it's just a swing of the camera.
Yeah, no, yeah, I like that, because you leave the main story on that cliffhanger, right? And then the cliffhanger of the backup is that ending too. So I thought that was pretty cool. And do you have like some long-term plans, or are you just kind of like taking it as it goes with this one? Is this something that you would want to write like for a good amount of time, kind of like what you're doing with Moon Knight?
Oh yeah, I mean, like obviously we're only approved out to a certain amount of issues, like any other ongoing series. But yeah, I'd love to keep it going. I've got no end of stuff to do with Doctor Strange, because it's such a rich corner of the world, and it has such like a long pedigree. It's like Doctor Strange is, as a title, is old as hell.
Yeah.
Like this is like, old, Lee and Ditko stuff, like way back in the day in Strange Tales. So like there's so much stuff there to explore and get into that like I'll stick with it as long as they'll let me do the book. And again, like it all comes down to sales. So hopefully get some of that Moon Knight energy.
Yeah, I hope so, dude, because like I said, I really dug that first issue. It was a great start to this start and continuation of what you've been doing with the character. So yeah, I hope everybody listening and watching, make sure you go pick up that book. It's out now. So I want to jump into your Avengers. So this is huge, right? Like Avengers is one of the flagship books of Marvel, and you're following up Jason Aaron's, I think, 5-year, maybe 6-year run by the time it's done.
I think it's 5, but I'm not sure.
So
I have a hard time. I don't know. Like I went back to catch up on his run, and I think it was like started like 2017 or something. I was like, what? Seriously? I thought it started like a year or two ago. I just lose all sense of time, especially now that I'm doing comics full time, where the only thing I'm paying attention to is like the next date I have a comic out. Yeah. So like the actual larger scale of time completely passes me by. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's Jason's been doing this, I mean, as he always does, like this huge story, this huge book, and like he's got 2 titles running to keep it all, keep it all together and tell it all. It's really an amazing feat. So yeah, coming up after that is intimidating, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, look, I feel like a lot of the runs, it used to be where there'd be like a little bit more of a break in between, like when, especially like, look, Jason Aaron's Thor, right? Like that immediately went into Donny Cates. And then Immortal Hulk immediately, that's kind of funny, but also immediately went
I
into Donny
also
Cates,
immediately went to Donny Cates.
So like, I mean, I always remembered a time like that there would be sometimes a little bit of a break in terms of some books, obviously books like Daredevil, like it was almost like they were passing the baton. They'd leave
Yeah.
him in a fucked up situation, and then hey, you got to figure it out. But I like that this kind of feels like already just from the lineup, a pretty good departure of what was going on. Did you have any directive in terms of like who like quote unquote like needed to be on the team and anything like that? Like, because I know sometimes they want to have a little bit of like synergy with the films, but or how much input did you have in terms of the lineup?
So yeah, like my first pass at it was quite different from what we ended up with, because I think I was talking to Kieran Gillen. I was asking about something, and he's like, "Oh, Jason's ending his Avengers soon, right?" And he's like, "Do you have like a pitch for it?" I'm like, "I don't have a pitch for Avengers. Are you kidding me? No one's gonna ask me to do that." But so I just made one anyway, like a little back pocket thing, and it was like all kind of like C and D list characters, because I was like, well, it would be interesting to have an Avengers book where all the characters on the team, like this is the only book they appear in. None of them have solo books, because like then you can do all like the soap opera stuff and whatever. So sometime down the line, Tom emailed, is like, hey, do you want to pitch for Avengers? So it's like if you're talking to me, like if this is not a misdirected email, yes, absolutely. So I sent him that pocket pitch. I'm like, listen, I've had this kicking around. I'm going to work on something serious, but maybe take a look at this, see if it has any legs. And we kind of came to the same agreement, or the same conclusion, in that like that's fine. That's like it's a good pitch, but it's not really the Avengers. Like your team of, I say lower tier, I just mean in like popularity and stuff like that. Uh, Characters as the Avengers is great, but it's not the Avengers. It's Secret Avengers, it's Savage Avengers, it's one of the kind of the Avengers affiliate titles, where for the Avengers, both Tom and I feel like this has got to be all the big names. You know, you get your Captain America, your Iron Man, Thor, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, Vision, and Scarlet Witch. I mean, Vision and Scarlet Witch are more of a nod to my own experience growing up. Cause like I grew up reading '70s Avengers, and it was Scarlet Witch and Vision were always kind of stalwarts in that era, because they never had their own books.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Captain America would come and go, Thor would come and go, Iron Man always kind of stuck around for the most part. So yeah, and in part, sure, like there's a certain amount of movie synergy there, because in a way that they haven't been in the past, Marvel characters are household names. Everybody knows who they are, or at least knows their name and has a vague idea of what they look like. It's, for me, a lot of it was that same kind of philosophy Grant Morrison had when they put together that JLA run, which was a huge benchmark for me for like big superhero teams. And this is the pantheon. This is the gods of this world. You have Superman, you have Wonder Woman, you have Batman, Flash, because of course you do. This is the biggest team in the world, and that's what I wanted the Avengers to feel like. This is the biggest team in the world, with the biggest, most popular characters outside Wolverine and Spider-Man, and potentially Daredevil, and now Moon Knight. So that's kind of like the idea. Like I wanted an Avengers team that felt big, that was loud, that was in your face, that was couldn't be ignored, and that's the direction we went in.
What was the decision to not have it be Steve as Cap? Does that go kind of in line with, like I said, like the synergy?
I guess almost accidentally. Part of the thing is that having a classic Avengers lineup of the big names is also, unfortunately, a very white lineup, and
That's
we
true.
have Sam as Cap there, and I was like, well, that's a perfect. I'll use him as the Captain America. And also in part, I think it serves a real story need. It's something that we outline in the first issue, but I've said it before. This is a team of gods and monsters. If this is the super powerful stuff, and Sam Wilson is the closest thing they have to a normal person, because he's not just Captain America. He's Sam Wilson, like inner city social worker. So
Right.
he's the person that roots that team back in their humanity, when it's very easy to get lost in a world of gods and kings and alien hybrids and billionaire super geniuses. You have a guy who is used to be, I mean, ironically, for a guy who used to be the Falcon, he's a guy who's very grounded,
Yeah.
and in a way that Steve Rogers, again, living legend of World War II, isn't the same way. So I think it's not just a kind of thing like, okay, let's get someone who's not white for this, but also I think that this character has something in particular that Steve Rogers does not, that he brings to the table in a way that I think is really useful for the story and useful for the team and the composition.
Mm-hmm. And are you sticking with, because I mean, obviously, like teen books, like they always kind of, they'll have different lineups. Sometimes
Sure.
another character will be introduced. Is this going to be the lineup for like a good while? Are there ideas of maybe bringing in other teammates, or maybe like based on like whatever the mission is, kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's not set in stone by any means, but this is the team that I want to have for at least a decent period of time. So I want to solidify the idea that this is the group. This is the lineup. I mean, the Avengers have never had a consistent lineup. I've been going through the old Avengers, and like people quit and rejoin every issue. However, for my own sanity, I do want to keep this as our group for now, because I want to establish an identity for this team. I want not a brand certainly, but I want people to say, okay, who are the Avengers? Well, you know who the Avengers are. These are the Avengers, and that's what I want to kind of have a certain sense of consistency.
Yeah, for sure. And
Which
is
is
there,
which isn't to rule out any kind of roster changes down the line, but for a period of time, these are the characters that I want to work with.
yeah, no, I love the lineup. I think it's definitely cool to see Vision and Scarlet Witch back in. I was not reading Avengers in that era. I mean, I've gone back and read some of it.
Oh, sure.
I mean, obviously, like the logo even is a callback
Yeah,
to,
so like that '80s logo, yeah, that's
yeah.
great.
So like
I
I
haven't
love
seen that in
the,
ages, so that's a lot of fun.
yeah, it was cool to see that. So I think when they first announced it and they showed that logo, a lot of people speculated like, oh, is there going to be this kind of a lineup based on
Yeah,
that logo? And
and you had like Doctor
obviously,
Druid and Monica Rambeau and stuff like Black Knight. Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, kind of how much are you trying to kind of break away, like we talked about with Doctor Strange, but
sure.
you have more of a break with that character in terms of the runs he had previously, but following up Jason Aaron's run, like how are you going to kind of like, are you going to like drastically like pull away from it, like as much as like, are they going to be in the same headquarters, are you moving them, like how is this going to kind of separate in terms of like the end of that run and kind of jumping straight into something that you're going to do?
So yeah, I mean, I can't talk too much about the particulars there, just because I know how Jason's run ends, but no one else does.
Right.
But again, like it's a Jason Aaron book, the end is going to be absolutely apocalyptic. So we're going to come back in on the Avengers after a huge and traumatic event, and they're a bit at loose ends. It's time for some change. It's time to start again, and we'll look at them kind of that first issue. Our first issue is rebuilding. It's saying, okay, we're putting together a team. We're going to deal with these problems, as well as here comes the hook for the larger thing, which I don't think is a spoiler to say that we used Timeless this year to set up, which was great. I was able to be very selfish and take Timeless and twist entirely to my own ends.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've got stuff going on, but yeah, it's very much a rebuilding. It's very much renewing, reassembling, perhaps is the best way to say it for the Avengers. So as far as what's going to make it different, we have a very Earth focused kind of storyline here.
Okay.
Jason's been doing this like wild multiversal stuff, and I want to kind of like pull back from that and kind of focus on our world, our universe, because I think that's just, it's just a shift in direction, and it's a shift in focus just to again do something different.
And are you gonna? I mean, you talk about like the soap opera dynamic that, like, was kind of more prevalent back then. Are you
Sure.
gonna kind of have that type of vibe with this team, especially like here? And that's what I was gonna ask you too. Is it going to be more grounded? And I kind of like that. It's nice to. It's cool to have those stories where like they're big and bombastic, but it's also cool to have like where the team is kind of like on Earth and they're fighting and doing whatever they're doing there.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, it will be big and bombastic. Don't get that wrong. But it's just in a different kind of direction.
Okay.
But yeah, as far as soap opera stuff, it's always a really tricky balance to pull in a book like Avengers, because our Avengers team has 7 members, 6 of which have their own books. So it's very difficult to do soap opera stuff or like relationship stuff or what have you, when that can easily be superseded by something happening in a solo book. I can't have Iron Man and Scarlet Witch start dating because they're probably doing their own thing in their own books.
You're right.
That said, like, I think a lot of what's interesting about the Avengers is how these characters relate to one another. And when you put them together on a team, all these huge personalities, these people with, I'm not gonna say huge egos, but huge responsibilities, it's interesting to see them come together, as people who have conflicts, personal conflicts, dramatic conflicts, but also this is kind of the only place where these characters can go to be with their peers. It's something I really enjoyed about early Avengers stuff, where it's less about the world's premier superhero team as they would later become, and more about it's kind of like a social club for weirdos,
Yeah.
where they'll like they'd hang out in a mansion in New York in their costumes, and Jarvis would bring out like sandwiches and stuff because you know who else are you going to talk to about this stuff? Like everyone's got their own supporting cast, but this is a group of no one here is a supporting cast. This is a group of lead characters all coming together, and they can talk about lead character problems.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this lineup because like I love Vision and Scarlet Witch, and I'm interested to
No,
see like kind of the dynamic between them, because they have so much history together, being together, not being together,
yeah,
and stuff. So I think that'll be kind of fun to explore. If you are, I would imagine you will, in some way.
yeah. I mean, like there's all kinds of interactions between these characters we're going to explore as we go on down. We're starting pretty loud and fast, so it's all action all the time. But there's just lots of great stuff between these characters. There's you have founding Avengers, and you've got people who have became Avengers, more recently. Character I've been really enjoying. I wasn't really expected to. It kind of snuck up on me. Is Black Panther, because T'Challa's been getting up to a pretty dramatic situation in his own run,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing the fallout of that when he's on the Avengers, I think it's really interesting to me, and I think it's the most fun I've had with that character. Not that I've written a whole lot of Black Panther, but I think it's a direction that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I know. And then you got the new run that's coming up where he's like wearing a completely different costume. So I like, I guess this kind of leads into like, how much are you able to kind of write separate from what's going on in the ongoing books of others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or how much do you have to kind of incorporate into the story? Is it going like Black Panther, for instance?
Sure.
Are you going to be able to like kind of write it with not having to adhere too much exactly to what's going on? Is it kind of like, is
I
it
mean,
kind of a more fluid thing in
I
terms of
think
like,
there's a certain amount of like stretching and bending
yeah,
that you're going to get with superhero comics to make things fit together. But by that metric, I still want to try to like I don't want to ignore or overwrite the work that my colleagues do, because it's just kind of a shitty way to do things. It's it's a pain because, like I said, we've got 6 solo books, and
yeah,
these characters are all all going through adventures and changes and problems in their own lives, and juggling all that to fit together in Avengers is interesting. But I've also have like Brevoort's the editor on the book, and he's the editor's editor, right? Like
yeah.
he's had no small amount of experience fitting things in, and like playing the Tetris of superheroes. So he's on it. So for instance, he's like, okay, we're gonna need this Black Panther costume change in issue 3. I'm like, okay, sure. He sends out he keeps tabs and all that. So that's really quite good.
That's the sign of a good editor, man. Like,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that so often, like, you can see when something, and I've said this so many times, but you can tell when a book's not properly edited or the editor's not really paying attention, and like then you get those mistakes, like in terms of continuity or
Sure.
whatever, So I'm very excited to hear that he's the one editing the book, and the book looks fantastic. I'm very excited to see what you got coming up with it.
Yeah.
And are
I
you
was
pulling anything from like your favorite era? Like, are there any callbacks that you kind of want to do, or in terms of characters that you dug back then? I mean, I know you said your original pitch was like C and D list kind of characters, lower
Yeah.
tier characters. Are any of those going to be making appearances?
I mean, not quite. I mean, to a certain extent, like there's like nothing is ever wasted. I've still got notes for stuff that never went through that I end up using years down the line. It's always useful to write stuff down, like come up, I would come up with a lot of pitches just as a mental exercise, when I wasn't writing full time, because it's just fun to do. I would think of, like, when I used to work at a grocery store before I was trying to get teaching work. That was, it was the most boring job in the world. So all I do is make up stories all day in my head as I'm like, shuffling fucking zucchinis around. And, I get home and I'll write down my notes, and I'll go back years later and like, okay, well, that's a good idea. I'll pick that out. Or like, this is a good name. I'll use that. But yeah, like I'm definitely getting into things that I like. We've got some Kang stuff, spinning out of Timeless, which is going to be fun. Having Terminus in that first issue, Terminus is a character who I think is like really cool, but ended up as a jobber. So we brought him in to job for the Avengers in this first issue. But maybe that will pay off down the line. Who knows? So yeah, I'm just kind of like picking and choosing all this stuff. I really, and the thing with Avengers is you can kind of do whatever you want. It's not like I'm writing Black Cat and have to be like, okay, can I use this big villain? Is no one else using it? It's, with the Avengers, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can have whatever villain I want for the most part, like whatever characters I need, because it's the Avengers. It's the big table.
Yeah. Like I said, dude, I can't wait to pick it up. Is there, before we stop talking about Avengers, is there anything you can tease about what you have planned for Avengers?
I don't think I tease much more than is already out there. I will take a moment to talk about the art, though, which I do think for the preview pages are out there. I was very psyched to get CF Villa on the book. CF and I had worked together on Black Cat for 5 or 6 issues. Yeah, something like that. And then he went on to X-Men. He was great to work with in Black Cat, and you see his work in X-Men. Like, well, obviously this guy is going to be a superstar, and he's pulling off this big superhero scope team stuff. So I was very pleased that he agreed to join us on Avengers.
Yeah, I think that the art looks phenomenal. So I cannot wait to see it. It looks like a beautiful book. Characters look dope. Can't wait for that. I know, and I look, you're writing 3 ongoings right now,
Yeah.
but is there anything else that you're working on? I mean, it's so cool to hear. Like, last time we talked, you were still teaching. So
Yes.
it's cool to see you be able to like kind of make this full time and like, focus fully on comics.
Yeah. So a couple things. I finished working on. I did one of those Extreme Venomverse stories with Danny Earls, which looks really cool. So I'm looking forward to that being out. And yeah, like I'm working on a couple little things here and there, but I'll certainly not do more than 3 ongoings. Like that's especially when one of them is Avengers,
Yeah.
which is like having 2 books. But I've got a few more surprises up my sleeve, but nothing that will be announced anytime soon. So
Okay, cool.
at the moment, it's just Avengers, Moon Knight, and Doctor Strange.
Awesome, dude. Well, like I said, I'm loving everything you're doing. Super stoked to finally have Doctor Strange out. Can't wait for Avengers. And I just want to, thank you again so much for taking time to chat some comics with me.
No, I'm happy to.
For everybody listening and watching, I'll drop the links where they can follow you online, stay all up to date
Sure.
with the stuff you're working on. And yeah, dude, I'd love to, when Avengers comes out, I'd love to talk to you again.
Yeah, send me a Google Calendar invite.
Yeah, I will definitely, man. Well, thank you again so much, man.
Yeah, no problem.